Hi, I'm Dan Champa from Tiger King Muay Thai, and today we're going to go over basic sparring techniques. So, one thing we must realize when we're doing basic sparring techniques is the area that we're competing in. So a lot of people don't realize that once you're in a ring, you are limited to space from either trying to evade from attacks or come forward offensively. One thing you must remember is that the corner and the ropes can be your enemy or best friend. Being pinned against the corner or the ropes is the worst possible situation you can be in, and the best way to escape from that is moving forward. So, if someone backs me up against the ropes with a flurry, this is the worst situation I could get in, but the only way to get out, I could either grab my opponent to neutralize it, or I could push my opponent back and come forward. So, ring control is a huge factor also on judges' cards for competing, so you always want to consistently train for ring control and getting familiarized with the ring. So, always remember, when you're competing against a right-handed fighter, you always want to circle to your right, away from their power hand. So, if someone's coming forward, I'm going to move right, and I want to get away from their right hand and their right leg as best as I can possible. Other tips you also want to remember is looking into your opponent's eyes. If your opponent is going to strike you and is a very amateur fighter and looks down, he's most likely going to attack your lower region. So, if someone tries to attack low and looks down, you're going to strike high. You always want to attempt to use the opposites of what your opponent is using. For example, if my opponent is kicking, I want to try to punch. If my opponent is punching, I want to try to kick. If my opponent is kneeing, I want to keep him at bay by posting and defending. So, another thing you also want to, the most basic thing is to look at the center of the chest. Sometimes it's hard if you're training with people who have shirts on, but once you're in competition without your shirt, you're able to see that the movement that they're producing. So I look at his chest, he throws a strike, and I'm able to see where he's throwing that strike. Throwing up top. So when I see that the chest moves, I must be aware that something's going to come. Also, another thing to always be aware of when you're doing basic sparring is obviously you always want to keep your hands up and your chin down. Always pin. If I get in trouble, I do want to turn it up and defend, but I also need to ensure that I move away and not stay in that position where my hands are pinned. Another basic technique you want to always realize that if your opponent is covering up high, I don't want to continue striking high, I want to go low with technique. Also, another thing you want to try to observe with your opponent is what their strength is and what your strength is. If I'm a very good kicker and my opponent is a good puncher, I most likely want to utilize that to my advantage. I'll use my hands to set up my kicks. So he comes with punches, I block, I come back with punches, and finish with a kick. If my guy's a clincher, I also want to stay out of his range. So he's trying to grab me to clinch to knee. I'm going to try to evade as best as possible away from him by using my footwork. A key aspect to get better angles and better positions is using your footwork in different angles. So the best angle a fighter can possibly get is right here. Why is that the best angle? Because they're unable to see and they're going to have to turn their head to the strike. So that's why most commonly in boxing you'll see they throw a 1-2, they throw a hook, and they step to the side, which is known as a side step. It evades the attack and also gives me an advantage to striking. And that is the basics of sparring techniques.